I was a media advisor to the Iranian nuclear negotiating team, and I bore no uh, government position then or now. I'm an academic. Iran retaliated against the Israeli attack on Iran. It's not the Israeli regime that wants to retaliate. The Israeli regime attacked with the United States Iran's they carry out many provocations. They've attacked Iran's nuclear program through a cyber attack. The Americans and the Israelis, it's well documented. They murdered Iranian scientists. One was a colleague of mine at the University of Tehran. They murdered him in front of his wife. They murdered a deputy defense minister in Iran. Then they bombed the Iranian embassy, which is outrageous. It's the first of its kind in history, except for an American airstrike on the Chinese embassy in the former Yugoslavia, which they claimed was a mistake. The Chinese never believed them. But then, so when the Israeli regime bombed the Iranian embassy, Iran retaliated. And then the Israeli regime murdered an official guest of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Monter Ismail Haniyeh, as he was attending the president's inauguration. Right after the inauguration ceremony, hours later, in an official government guest house, they murdered him and his companion. So the retaliation from Iran with regards to what you said about Netanyahu and the assassination, that was obviously a lapse in Iranian security, but that wasn't a major achievement. Uh, this government guest house was clear for everyone to see. It had a view of the mountains. It was built before these long-range uh, anti-tank missiles or missiles that can be fired from a few kilometers away. They fired from the hilltops around Tehran, and in future, though no one thought that the Israeli regime would be so well. I think few people thought that the Israeli regime would strike a guest for the presidential inauguration. He was a special guest, like all of the special guests. We had heads of state. We had many heads of state. So the Israeli regime, by bombing embassies, by bombing official guests of countries, are violating the most basic principles in diplomatic affairs and with regards to states, and it should be condemned. But the Israeli regime, it doesn't have a very strong intelligence gathering capability. No, without a doubt, they don't have great capabilities. It is the collective West that is feeding them intelligence. It is the Five Eyes. It is the U.S. and their military, their airplanes flying over the region, their bases across the region. Even now, as the Israelis want to attack Iran, the Americans have said openly that they're going to help them. It is Western embassies across the region in Iran, in Lebanon, that are assisting them. The Israelis would not even be able to continue this war for a week if it wasn't for day and night the West supporting the United States has done everything it can against Iran for decades. That's why we have maximum pressure sanctions. It means they cannot do more. We've had maximum pressure sanctions for many years in Iran, and it is falling apart because the world is moving away from the West, such as we've seen the establishment of BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. No, Iran's nuclear facilities are deep underground. And Iran's military industry, because there was always a threat of the United States attacking Iran. Remember, the United States surrounded Iran when they invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, and their presence in the Persian Gulf region is enormous. So the Iranians for years have been developing underground capabilities that are untouchable to the West. And even in Lebanon, Hezbollah is in no crisis, by the way, just to make this point clear. Hezbollah's thousands of kilometers of underground tunnels and bases throughout the south of Lebanon, central Lebanon, and northern Lebanon are untouched. And the Israeli regime has not been able to do anything about it. And that's why they've been defeated on the border during the battles over the last week. Hezbollah's weakest link was always Beirut because of the nature of Beirut. Hezbollah, their weak point was Beirut, and that is basically because of decades of the West being able to gather intelligence in the capital. Beirut has always been known as a city for spying and espionage. Western intelligence agencies, American AWACS and drones overhead, all of them they've been gathering intelligence for decades. Western NGOs, Western journalists, they've infiltrated Lebanon for decades before Hezbollah was ever created. During the period when the PLO was in Lebanon and Europe and India used to support the Palestinian cause and used to be the pride of the global South, what India was doing for the Palestinian people. Back then, during Yasser Arafat and the PLO, Beirut was heavily infiltrated by Western intelligence agencies. But as I said, Hezbollah's capabilities across the country, and in particular in the South, where the battles are raging, they are 100% intact. So those assassinations and those murders, which alongside it, hundreds of civilians were murdered in the West and the Western media, and unfortunately some other people have tried to downplay the civilian slaughter. That aside, Hezbollah on the battlefield is holding. That is why the Israeli regime has failed to make any progress on the ground. And just as the tunnels in Lebanon, the Israelis have been unable to do anything about them. In Iran, all of its key military assets and all of its peaceful nuclear program, all of its key assets are deep underground. The Israeli regime, if they strike Iran and they do damage, whether it's a military base or whether it's a part of the Iranian nuclear program or whether it's Iranian economic installations, the Iranian response will be much more severe than what we saw last week. And I think we saw how almost all of the Iranian missiles got through, and Iran did not fire any hypersonic missiles. We are not frightened of the Israeli regime. I would refrain from using Western media and Western sources because they are obviously working hand in hand with the Israelis. If anyone thinks, if any of us rely on the West for our information, then I think we're all in deep trouble. Any of us who at least follows it. He just on Friday, Ayatollah Khamenei went in the middle of Tehran and gave not only a Friday prayer sermon, but afterwards he spoke with people, and before that he sat in a ceremony to commemorate in that place, to commemorate Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. So he was there for hours in the open amidst millions of people, and he did not look frightened at all. So no, we are not frightened of the Israeli regime. It is a weak and vulnerable regime. Whatever resources it has comes from the West, and it has exposed itself to the world as a genocidal regime, as a regime that's willing to carry out a Holocaust. And the West, by siding with this regime, has destroyed its image across the world.
Okay.
But it is possible that the Israelis may strike Iran. But the Iranian response will be, without a doubt, the Iranian retaliation will, without a doubt, be overwhelming. I think you have seen footage of the missiles striking, and I think you've seen how devastating the impact was. It was if Iran severely damaged Israeli military capabilities. Look, let's be very blunt here. The Israeli regime is the same. This is the same regime that says they don't kill civilians, but at the same time they call Palestinians Amalek. As I pointed out, Iran severely damaged their military capabilities. One was the air base. And the very fact that Iran strikes military targets and not civilian targets, whereas the Israelis focus on civilian targets. I was in Beirut during the last, for 8 or 9 days. I just returned 3 days ago. They've been bombing houses and residential towers day and night. They've been slaughtering women and children, just as they do in Gaza. Well, as I said, without a doubt, the planes were destroyed and damaged. But more than that is the very fact that none of the missiles, which are older generation missiles of Iran, none of them were stopped. Among the almost 200, roughly 200 missiles that the Iranians fired, only 8% or 9%, I don't know the exact number, didn't get to their destination. And it's not clear how many of them were intercepted and how many of them didn't make it. Because as I said, many of these are older generation missiles that have been in stock for a very long period of time. First of all, almost all of them got through. That's key. And second of all, that's the same question that people asked me in April when Iran fired the drones and old missiles. When Iran fired 300 drones and a couple of dozen of older missiles, Iran forced the Israelis and the Americans did the heavy lifting, not the Israelis. Their air defense capabilities are the more important ones, not the Israelis. But they use all of their capabilities to down these drones. They spent billions of dollars, whereas Iran spent literally nothing. But that was an intelligence gathering operation. This time round, the Iranians used these drones that got through, and they still have not revealed their real capabilities to the Americans or the Israelis. Yes, Iran can easily do that. Iran has hundreds of thousands of missiles. Iran, Hezbollah, the resistance has shown restraint for a year.
Yeah.
For a year. It is not Iran that bombs embassies. It's not Iran that murders international guests. It's not Iran that bombs homes and apartment blocks. I think it's clear as day which side is carrying out acts of evil. The United States is not going to be able to defeat Iran. Israel has already lost the war. It has lost in Gaza. It has failed to take Gaza. It has failed to take any parts of Lebanon. And it has failed in the eyes of the world because it has exposed itself as a genocidal regime. And Iranian missiles got through all the defense capabilities with great ease. And the Israeli regime knows that. And the reason why the Americans don't want escalation is because they know that the Iranians can hit back very, very, very hard. But Netanyahu, who knows he's lost the war and will lose the war, he wants to get the Americans into the war because he doesn't care about the West or anyone else. He doesn't care about the global economy. He cares about Netanyahu. But the problem is that if the Americans enter the war, American assets in the Persian Gulf and in Iraq will be swept away. And those regimes that host American bases, their oil and gas installations will be swept away because war is war. So that would destroy the global economy. That would destroy the Indian economy, the Iranian economy, the US economy. Every economy across the globe will be destroyed or wrecked in a way in which I don't think we'll see it recover during our lifetime. And the Israelis don't care because the only thing they care about is their own selfish interest and preserving this colony, which stands upon the blood of so many innocent Palestinians and Lebanese and others.